It works! It works! G'day, Ben from Duck Playing Chicken here with the third part in this build series of the 11000 Space Battleship Yamato 2202 from Bandai. As you've seen from that small clip at the start, I've managed to get the turret to not only light up the guns but also to rotate. So the other cool thing is I've hooked up a remote control, very basic sort of remote control setup with an Arduino. But if I hit the right number, so the turret turns and it should turn back. There we go. So I've got the fiber optics in there, and that is being driven by a single warm white LED. Just turn my power supply off. So get a bit close to the camera. You can see that underneath here, what we have here is a stepper motor, which is a little bit different to a normal DC motor. So a normal DC motor, it will rotate in a particular direction depending on which way it's actually wired up. It'll either go forward or in reverse. A stepper motor is a little bit different. A stepper motor can hold its position, so it can travel forward or reverse, but it can also hold a particular position even when with a little bit of torque on it. Now, of course, all this has to do is hold up a little bit of plastic, so it's not like it's under a lot of stress. And this was the smallest one that I could sort of get access to that would be, you know, fairly straightforward to wire up. So the bottom part of it here is the stepper motor, and above it is a gearbox just to gear it right down. This lead out here is the warm white LED that's hooked up inside, and I'll show you how all that works in a minute. But essentially I've got three of these guns that I didn't show in the last episode as far as how I was going to light them. So I'll take you through that whole process of how I'm going to set them up for lighting. Okay, I've taken the gun off the deck and you can see the stepper motor under there. So I'm going to show you how I basically set this up, because it does take quite a bit of sort of modifications to quite a few modifications I should say, in order to make it work. So first of all, if we have a look underneath, you probably get an idea of the difference between, you know, the one below which hasn't been modified and the one on the top that has. So a big part of this is actually getting it attached to the stepper motor, so you can see the sort of white styrene socket I've made there. The other thing to consider too is that I tried to get the gimmick of the barrels rising and falling to work as well, but there was no way I could have that and have it lit and have it on a stepper motor. So I've had to sort of basically accept that that gimmick will no longer work, and if I take this bottom bit off, you'll probably get an idea of why. So you can see it's pretty tight in there. There are three fiber optics, 0.5mm diameter fiber optics that are coming from the barrels to the back here, where I've got a little bit of styrene tube that sort of collects them all in one place, and then a LED sort of attached to the back of it. And so there's been a whole lot of stuff sort of taken out of the middle here in order to make that happen. And you can see here's one that hasn't been modified yet. You can see all the stuff that's sort of going on in there in order to get the barrels rising and falling happening. I need to take all that out. So let's start looking at how we did it. I will come back to mounting the stepper motor, because you can see I've had to even modify the base. You can see one here that hasn't been modified yet, what it looks like. So I've had to do quite a bit of work there. So I'll go through that after I've done the main gun itself. So the first thing I need to do is sort of remove these barrels, and we take these little almost like little paddles off. You can see that the gun hooks over that bar there. So if I sort of, you can see it sort of latches over that. And what I need to do is be able to get an LED all the way through the gun barrel and through that into the back. Actually, just looking at it, I think I can take this piece off too. There we go, take that off. Yeah, so that's better. That's sort of all. I'll take these out. So we'll reduce it down to its bare shell. And sort of having a look at this one and the modified one, you can see the amount of stuff that's I've sort of taken out. Alright, so back to the gun barrel. What I need to do is first of all drill a hole all the way through this gun barrel. And the first time I did this, it turned out to be trickier than I thought. So I'm using a 0.6mm drill bit, so not a 0.5, just 0.6, because the LED will be set back a bit, so it doesn't matter if it's not sort of tight in there, it'll be fine. And what you need to do is make sure that you get the drill bit lined up properly, because you want it to go straight and true through the barrel. And what I found is the drill bit, of course, isn't long enough to go all the way through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start drilling this and then show you the trick of how I sort of got around that. Okay, I've got about as far as I can get with the drill bit, so obviously it hasn't gone all the way through. So what I'm going to do now is just drag the drill bit out a little bit. And this is where you've got to be really careful. I certainly wouldn't recommend using a powered drill for this part. In fact, I'd probably stick to a hand pin vise for all of this, just to gives you a lot better control. So now what I can do is, if you see here, I'll be able to get the drill bit at least down to where that step happens. And the idea is I'm actually going to cut it at that step and drill the rest of the barrel out and then join them together. You just want to gently drill, and you always want to bring the drill bit out every now and then, clear off the swarf, because once those tracks in the drill get filled up with swarf, the drill won't sort of drill any further, so you've got to keep cleaning it out. It's just a matter of sort of keep drilling, making sure, you know, keep checking to make sure I've got the drill going straight through it. You don't want to be on an angle and find that your drill bit comes out on the side, you know, where you don't want it. It is time consuming, I won't lie. I've already done a few of these barrels and it just does, it takes a bit of time, but it's alright. We're not in a hurry. Now, as far as using pin vise, I always sort of rest the swivel part in the palm of my hand, and then use, you know, my fingers to basically do the drilling. So sort of pushing with your palm, just a bit of pressure, you don't need too much, and then turning the drill with your fingers. It took me a while to actually find a pin vise that I found comfortable to use. I've used a Tamiya one in the past, but I find that one a little bit uncomfortable if you use it quite a bit. So I found this one works pretty well. This is a Master Tools one. I don't know where I got that, probably from my hobby store. The other thing I like about it too is it's got a proper adjustable chuck. So it will take, you know, I've had drills in here down to sort of 0.3, 0.25. It seems to handle those okay, so it's got a reasonable quality chuck in it. I know the Tamiya ones, you kind of have to change out the chuck depending on what sort of size range you're using, which I'm not a big fan of. That's not to say Tamiya don't make fantastic tools, because I use a lot of their tools, but their pin vise not so much. So really what I'm doing is just ensuring that I get the drill go as, you know, into this bit enough so I've got an idea where I need to start drilling again once I've cut this through. I think last time I sort of did this, I worked out that using a razor saw was the way to go. So this is razor saw, you can see how fine tooth that is. So now it is in 2 bits. So So you can see the hole's sort of gone through there. I'm going to have to be a bit careful. It's a bit close to the edge, so I think I might have to guide it sort of back in through the re-guide the drill bit so it goes on a little bit of an angle. The good thing about using fibre optic is that it will bend a little bit, so it doesn't matter if we change the course of the hole, because we just don't want it sort of popping out in the wrong spot. Alright, we can see the drill bit coming through there on the other side, so we are through. Of course, there's a little bit of plastic in there, just need to clear out. So this is a modified gun barrel, and you can see what I've done is I've just ground out a little bit on the back here so that the fibre optic can pass right through. So if we have a look at, compare the two, you can see the difference between them. So the one on the left is the modified one, the one on the right I just need to basically get a little groove in here that's big enough to get a fibre optic all the way through. So I'm just going to use my grinding tool for that. It does not have to be pretty, only functional, because this will not be seen as part of the Okay, so we've got that groove at the back. Now it's a matter of sticking these together. And what I might do is just run a little bit of fibre optic through to help line it up, and then I can run a bit of glue around the edge. And then once we can get it sort of set up, we can take out the fibre optic. So some, to me, extra thin. Now, because the fibre optic's got a bit of a curve on it, it does make it a little bit tricky, because what I want to do is, now I've got it lined up, I want to try and straighten it out a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to keep an eye on it just to make sure it doesn't sort of sag, but in the meantime I can sort of use one that I've already done. So that's essentially the process for the gun barrels themselves. For the getting into the rest of it, there is obviously a bit of grinding that needs to be done in here. So we can see we've got we've got a whole lot of area here that I need to get out. These holes for the pegs need to go. This one at the back needs to go. So I'll get my grinding tool, different bit, I think. Alright, there we go. All ground out, those three peg holes. Now this little center peg in here, you actually want to keep a little bit of it, and that's because I use it as a guide for where I put the connector to the spindle on the stepper motor. So I am going to trim it down a little bit, but not all the way. Now, of course, if we have the gun barrel in here, and we have a fibre optic, focus, we have fibre optic going through, of course that bar's going to get in the way. So what I also need to do is just cut a slither through that crossbar so that the fibre optic can pass all the way through. The gun barrel will still be able to latch onto that bar, although it doesn't really latch on, it just sits there, but that's fine. But now we've got a somewhat clear passage all the way through for the fibre optic, which will go into the back. Now, seeing all this, how rough it is, one way to tidy it up is to use, to me, extra thin, so just brush it over the top. And what that does is it helps smooth it all out, which I tend to do because I don't like having sort of, bits floating around and all that sort of thing. So it helps secure any loose bits you might have that you can't get out with a brush, and it just tidies it up, makes it all a little bit smoother. Alright, but you can see how much of a difference it makes. I mean, it's shiny because the glue is still wet, but That'll just help smooth it down all really well. Okay, I'll leave that part aside to dry and well and truly before I sort of do any more work on it. The next step is the this is the base of the turret. So I'm going to, if you look at the one that's modified, I've actually taken all the pegs off, and the reason for that is because I'm just going to glue it in place. So it actually doesn't need the pegs. It aligns in the turret really well, so you don't actually need those locator pins if you're going to glue it. So I'll just grind those right off. Okay, so those locator pins are now gone. So again, I'm just going to use some extra thin just to tidy it up a little bit. Now, as far as the turret goes, there's a sort of back piece and the two, what are these, spotlights or rangefinders or whatever they are. They don't need any modification, they're fine as they are. So really it's sort of the barrel, the bulk of the turret, and the last thing to do is to set up the connecting point that connects the turret to the spindle on the motor. So to make this little connector piece here, I'm using some styrene bar stock, and this stuff is 6.5 millimeters by 3, 6.5 by 3 mil. And so what I'm going to do is drill a hole through. I've already sort of made a mark here, and I'm going to start with a 2 mil drill bit. So the 2 mil is basically the diameter of the post in here. So I'm going to start with that first, and I want to drill all the way through. Okay, so we are now all the way through, and obviously I need to trim this bar right down around that hole, but I won't do that until after I've drilled the holes. It just makes it a bit easier to hold on to. So next thing we need to do is to drill a hole that matches this shaft here. And if I remember rightly, it's 3 mil, but I will just double check. Yep, that's 3 mil. So now I can take a 3 mil drill bit. I'm going to use a bigger drill. And this one I don't want to go all the way through. I just want to go through enough so that there's sort of like an inset hole, if you like. So let's see if we can see that. So you can see there's a 3 mil hole on the outside and a 2 mil down the bottom there. I think that's pretty good. I'll just double check that fits on there. Yes, it does. So that's good. Now this little 2 mil hole here, because that aligns with the peg on the top of the turret here, it just means that I get it in the right location. So it's more just a location issue. Alright, so now it's a matter of trimming around so I can get pretty close to that hole. So part of that I can use my razor saw, break that. Now there is a little bit of wastage here, but the rest I'm going to trim off with a knife. So I'll go ahead and just trim the rest of that up. Okay, I finished trimming the collar, and I've just located it in the turret housing. And so now I'll just drop a bit of glue down there so it glues it in place. And the main thing here is to make sure that there's enough space around the edges of it to be able to wrap the fibre optics around. So that's what I've aimed for there, but that all seems to fit okay. Okay, the next step is to set up the fibre optics in here and attach an LED to the end of it. So this has all had plenty of time to dry now. And what I've done is I've taken 3 0.5 mil fibre optics lengths, and I've used a bit of styrene tube and just cut off an end of it, and that's sort of going to act as a collar to sort of hold them all in place. So I'm going to actually I should show you the tube first, shouldn't I? So this is the tube that I'm using. It's just sort of styrene tube. I think it's about 2.5 mil wide. I suspect the hole is probably just under a mil wide. It seems perfect for holding 3 of these fibre optics. So I've just got the collar over like that, and I'm going to use some UV resin just to set that in place. Now once I've got it set in place, I can actually trim these flush and then put the LED behind it. So I've got my UV resin here. This is just the stuff that I get for those of you who are interested. You could probably do this with super glue as well, but I found that the resin holds pretty well, and really it's almost like a bit of a temporary measure, because we're actually going to sort of get all stuck in there. Let's put that up a little bit. We're going to stick it all in place sort of within the turret, so it's all set there, not going to move around. Alright, and I'll just set that with the torch. Okay, so now if we take now they're all sort of in place, I can trim it flush on the end. Like so. And now I can attach an LED to this end here. So for the LEDs, I'm using my trusty 0603 warm white 3 volt LEDs. They're pre-wired, so nice and easy to work with. I'm going to take one of these LEDs and dunk it. Actually, I might use a stand here, I think. It does help if you've got an extra pair of hands holding this stuff. It's a little bit awkward. I have the torch, I think, in my non-dominant hand, but we will see how we go. Okay, so I'm going to dunk the LED in the resin. I'm going to make sure it's oriented the right way. I apologise for the cockatoos you can hear in the background. You can see a light is coming out all those fibres. One's a little bit stronger than the others, but that's fine. You can see obviously there's a lot of light leak at the end, but we can soon fix that with a bit of fabric paint. Alright, now I need to basically feed the fibre optics in from the back and have them wrap around this collar bit here so that I can then sort of stick the LED in place. Now you can sort of see how tight it is there. Of course the fibre optics are going in any direction, but that doesn't matter because the gun turrets, the barrels will actually straighten those out and make sure they're in the right position. So it's all a bit tight in there, but it fits. Then we get some resin in there to basically hold it all in place. And again, you could do this with super glue, you could use putty, it doesn't really matter. It's just to hold it in place. And really, once it's all assembled, it shouldn't sort of really matter if it flaps around a little bit. Okay, now the next bit is to feed the turrets, sorry, the barrels. I keep calling them turrets, but feed the barrels through and just make sure that they're going to sit properly. They may need a bit of glue. Now, as far as the rest of the assembly goes, there are these 2 bits go on the sides, spotlights or rangefinders or something, I'm not sure what they are. Then we have the bottom piece, and I think I haven't quite worked out the best solution for this until I actually get the stepper motor sort of up and running properly. For now, I'm just guiding the wires through the existing hole in the bottom of the turret. Get it around the right way might help. And then that fits in like that. And then there's a back piece that slides on. And you kind of get an idea of what it looks like. And so I'm going to leave the fibre optics a little bit longer than the barrels just until I paint it, and then I can sort of trim them down a bit. That's essentially the lighting for the larger turrets and how that sort of all goes together. Okay, the next step is to work with the base and the stepper motor. So what I'm going to do is install the stepper motor first, and I'll install it on up this end here so that you can see the whole sort of process for that. But you can see the hole that I've made here is quite large to allow for the spindle to come through from the stepper motor, and there's a little hole in there for screwing it. Now I need to put in another one as well to hold it in place, but I'll take you through that process. So starting off, we can see the back here, we've got a solid bit of plastic there. We need to drill that out. So I'm just going to roughly drill it out. It doesn't need to be perfect because all of this under here is not going to be seen. Okay, and I'll just double check that the spindle sits properly. The reason I drill out the hole quite big is because you can see there's the spindle part, but at the base it's a little bit wider, so it's not a matter of just drilling a hole, but that will fit fine. Alright, so just a little bit of information about the stepper motor I'm using. So this is a 5 to 6 volt DC stepper motor, and it's a 10mm, which means the height of the motor here is 10mm. It's a 2-phase 4-wire type stepper motor, and it comes with a gearbox. Some other stats on this thing: it is a 18-degree step angle, so that's how fast the spindle, how far it travels with each pulse that it gets. And it's got a 1:63 reduction ratio with the gearbox in place. So what that means is it gives you a relatively smooth movement. It's not as smooth as, say, some of the bigger stepper motors you can get, but it's still not too bad for the size. There's a couple of reasons why I chose these ones. First of all, they're small, so obviously, if you can see when I mount it to the top there, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to fit it. I haven't actually tested it properly, but I'm pretty sure I'll be able to make it fit. So there's the size issue, but there's also this feature on the top here where you can see these two holes, and they are for M1.6 screws, and so that means I can sort of screw it in from the top. So I need to drill some holes first, and to do that I need to first mark out where these holes need to go. Now you can see the sort of location of the one that I've already drilled, so I'm going to try and replicate that here. Now the good thing about the moulding of this is that it sort of gives you these nice shapes that you sort of work with. It, you can line everything up, so I kind of like that. Next step is to drill out that hole. So to drill out the hole for the screw, I'm using a 1.5mm drill bit, being M1.6, so that's the sort of diameter of the business end of the screw. It means that I can sort of tap this into the plastic, so it'll give me a bit more of a secure affixment. Okay, so you can see that's now drilled through. And I think what I'll do is I will, while I'm at it, I'll drill the other hole as well. So now I've got those two holes drilled, I'm going to tap the screw through the hole, just because the hole is a little bit smaller, not by much, just a little bit smaller than the width of the screw. I'll get another one. So I just want to get them started so that they're just coming through. Okay, there we have it, screwed in place. So nice and tidy, relatively centered. It's not spot on, but it's I think it'll be fine for this purpose. And so yeah, that's not going to go anywhere. It's not like there's going to be a lot of stress placed on it, but given that the stepper motor came with those two affixing holes. It's good to screw them both in. Okay, now the next thing is to make sure that there is a path for the wire coming out of the turret going down into the back of this depression here. Okay, so now you can see there is a big hole at the back there, and that's where the wire will pass through. So the next thing is the base of the turret, which is this sort of ring piece here that has the elements that help the gimmick of the rise and fall of the barrels. If I take the one that I've already modified and put that in place, you'll get an idea of what I had to do in order to I had to grind out quite a bit of it, cut off the top bit. So I haven't finished this one yet because I haven't done the other screw for the stepper motor, but you get the idea. So for this one, the first bit is basically getting rid of all of this on the top here, so all this bit, while still maintaining this bottom bracket that sort of holds it in place. Okay, I've ground all that out. Looks messy. You can see I've put some marks here just to denote the back and front, because that's where I've got to make some space for the screws to go in. So that's the next bit, which is sort of grind out that area in there. If you have a look at this one, you sort of get an idea of what I'm aiming for. I'll do it on the other side as well. Alright, so we've got the areas ground out to allow for the screw holes. So let's put that in place. Now I'll clean up all those grinding marks with some Tamiya extra thin cement just to smooth it out. You can see in there I'll still be able to get see daylight through it. I'll still be able to get the wire in through there. It's all getting a bit tight in there, but it should be okay. There we go. Now of course I do have to fix these barrels, so they'll be glued in place, but you can see you get a nice clean attachment there of the turret to the stepper motor. Pretty happy with that. Got this wire coming out the back. I'm a little bit concerned about the amount of freedom this wire has, just because it's going to need to adjust its position as the turret rotates. So I'm just going to have to be mindful of that before I sort of start gluing wires down. That's essentially how I've got these larger guns set up with stepper motors. So I'll do that for the other one as well, which goes on the back piece here. So this is sort of a separate one. I'll set up the other screw hole for this one as well, so that's all sort of ready to go. Working on these side observation decks, you can see that I've stuck in a bit of plastic over the hole there, and on the other side of that I've got some cotton wool just to sort of diffuse the LED that I'll have stuck behind this. So just quickly to sort of show you, here's one I haven't done yet. You can see that gap in there, and I'm going to take just the tiniest bit of cotton wool. It really doesn't need that much, just because you only want to diffuse the light a little bit. There's not a huge amount of space in there anyway, so I've got that sort of roughly in place. The next thing to do is I've got some 0.5mm thick clear styrene, and I've just sanded it on both sides just to scuff it up a little bit so that light gets diffused a little bit more. It's also going to help with the adhesion when I stick an LED to one side of it. So I've just done that and sort of cut the length of it, and now it's just a matter of sort of sticking that in place. Alright, so that's in place now. Now after wiring up these, what I'm calling the mid-sized guns, I noticed that there was a lot of light leaking out through the bottom, so I've just used some Mr. Surfacer 500 to fill those gaps, and I'll be able to sand that down. It's not so much of an issue because it is on the bottom, so it's hardly going to be seen. But we've got the barrels there. Of course, the fibre optics. Of course, at the moment they're way too long, but they'll be trimmed down after I've actually painted them. I had a bit of a mishap in the deck at the back of the ship here. So what happened was I used a drill bit that was too large. It was actually sort of 1 millimeter and it was really too large, so I made a bit of a mess and tried to clean it up with a grinder and that sort of thing. So what I've ended up doing is sort of trying to recreate it as best I can. So yeah, a bit of a mishap, but it just goes to show, you know, you can always fix things up with a bit of scratch building. It's not far from perfect, and it's not as good as having the actual piece there, but it's still better than nothing at all. Alright, with the stepper motors, all lighting, probably several Arduino boards going into the hull of the ship, it's become a bit more complex than I thought. I think there'll be enough room within the ship, but the issue is around accessing different parts to set up the electronics, being able to paint stuff, and basically work out the logistics of getting it all together once it's sort of all wired up and, you know, ready for print, ready for painting. So I want to show you the work that I've done just on the shell here. I'm still in the process of sort of, you know, gluing on guns and what have you, but I wanted to show you, yeah, sort of, I think what's going to be a way to make it a lot easier for myself. So first of all, if I take off the back section, that isn't going to change that much. There's actually only a couple of lights in there. It's not too big of an issue. I'll probably just end up putting some sort of plug here where a plug comes out this side and just hooks that in. So I don't think that the rear of the craft's going to be the issue. I'm going to have some lights on these sort of decks on the sides here. I'm going to have like lighting for the guns. Now, if you look at just this, you know, the lighting that sort of goes on this side, there's really, it's really difficult to get to if I take the top off. So let's take the top off and have a look at it. You can sort of see that if I need to get in there and do sort of lighting and stuff, it's going to be quite tricky. And the nature of the kit is that these side blue parts here actually attach directly to the red parts. So I've sort of had to redesign the way this kit goes together. So if I take the nose off and the front deck, now normally it would be basically these two parts sort of glued together and they would be one with the lower half of the hull. But what I've done is made it so it's actually removable. So if I slide it forward and then lift it out gently, you can see it's now two separate parts. Now, in order to do that, I have had to grind out all these pegs and pins that go along here. On this side bit, I haven't actually changed that at all, but I have on this side. So I've scraped off, there's sort of tabs along here that match up with the corresponding side parts. So I've ground all that off and ground off all of these pegs on the side here. And what that allows me to do is basically slip on this blue part and it sort of slots in at the front, and then just, you know, obviously when I'm ready, I'll be able to just put a dab of glue in there and glue it together and that'll be fine. So I think that's the way I'm going to go. And if I take it off again and show you, it's going to be a lot easier to sort of get into this underside area. Rather than coming in from the top, I sort of have, you know, at the bottom as well to sort of manage, especially for these, you know, lights under here. It's just getting a bit tricky to sort of work purely from the top. So the other thing it allows me to do is to fix up these gaps on the front of the ship here. Now this is a separate bit and you can see there's quite a big sort of gap, like it's a lot bigger than the other panel lines around. So I want to do something about that, try and close that up. We've got these two little gaps here as well, which shouldn't be there. That should be a continuous plane. So I've got a bit of work to do, but I can actually sort of glue that in place, fix all that issue up, and that way, you know, it should be a lot cleaner than it currently is. The other thing this allows me to do, of course, is to paint this section separately from the red section. So that way I am going to have a perfectly clean line, the delineation between the red and the blue or the dark grey. So I think that's probably going to make life a lot easier for me. The other thing that will allow me to do is to basically do a whole lot of work on this top bridge part, especially with the stepper motors for the turrets and some of the lighting, the tower and that sort of thing, to be able to sort of work on that, and then I can, you know, see how I can drop that into place. I can glue it down from the underside, which is always a better way of doing it, and so again I can sort of get that part kind of done before I slot it onto, you know, the front here. Okay, I've finally started to sort of commit to lighting up some of these smaller turrets, and you can see I've sort of got it flashing here in the background, but let's get in a bit closer. Okay, so you can see the whole sort of fiber optics are lighting up, but of course what I'll be doing is painting the fibers and then just cutting off the ends. That's why they're a bit long, well, they're actually quite a bit longer than what they'll end up being. They are, it was a little bit tricky sort of getting the barrels parallel, so drilling the holes so that they'll parallel, especially for these ones where we've got like four barrels coming out of. Now these fiber optics are plastic, they're not sort of true glass, so you can actually bend them, which is what I've sort of been trying to do to get them to be at least a little bit more parallel, and as they get shorter it's actually yeah, it's going to be a bit easier. So this is just these top sort of 6 turrets up here. You can see I've had to do a bit of putty work on these lower ones because I sort of drilled in the wrong spot and had to do a bit of work, but that's all that is. I haven't actually lit these ones up yet. I just wanted to show you these ones because they're all going to be done pretty much the same way. So let me show you how I've done that. Take the back of the tower out. So thankfully this bit is separate, which is great. Now I've got 2 leads coming out. I've got these connectors. I'll probably end up just sort of soldering everything. It's really just because these LED strips that I'm using that you can see here, they work by chaining them together. So I basically need one set of wires that go to the Arduino and the other set need to go to the next sort of link of LEDs. So I'll bring this up nice and close. You can see that everything's a bit shiny, and that's because I basically used a whole lot of UV resin to set not only the fiber optics, so these are just short lengths sent through the holes, and basically use the UV resin to sort of hold them in place, and then over the top of that I have put in these strips. So if we have a look at the strips as they come in a roll, they come in groups of 5 like this, so you can see the line there where you can cut them off sort of every 5 LEDs. And there's also a little black arrow there that shows the direction of the data. So basically you would have from the right hand side, you would have the data pin from your Arduino going in, and then you'd have a line coming out on the left hand side here that would go to your next strip of addressable LEDs. I did mess up a little bit with the wires sort of going around here. I got a bit of UV resin on the wires, so they're sort of stuck in that position. It just means I've got to be a bit more careful when I get the tower wiring sort of through there, that's all. So yeah, that's sort of the basic principle, I guess, of how I'm sort of doing these. Of course, these are 0.5mm diameter fiber optics. And I'm going to have to go ahead and do that for all these guns. So each of these have 4 barrels, and then these 2 little ones here, they each have 2. Double that for both those sides. And then also on the hull here, we've got another set of 4, and these are sort of double barrel turrets. So there's quite a few of these little guns that are going to be lit up on this ship. The other thing, while I've got the hull out here, I just want to sort of highlight, I've done some work on cleaning up this seam along the top here. It looks as though I've sort of filled in the panel line down here, but I haven't. It was just a matter of sort of reducing the gap, because it was quite a big gap. If you look at the other sort of panel lines, this thing seemed a lot bigger. So what I've done is I've just used a bit of Mr. Surfacer 500 and just sort of carefully put it in there to try and reduce that gap a little bit. So I'm going to grind it out just a little bit so that the panel line is clear again, but this one will be a nice flush edge. I also had to do a bit of sanding around the weapon here, around the nose, because there was just a few sort of bits that didn't quite look right, so I did a bit of work on that. The rest of it seems okay. You know, it all sort of fits reasonably well. Put this on, you know, it sits nice and flush. So now this sort of bit's all glued up and everything goes together quite nicely. Okay, I have been spending the last few days trying to get these very small guns all set up for lighting. So this has been a bit of a journey, a bit of a long saga, I guess, but I think I'm kind of nearly there. So what you're seeing is basically what will be the lighting that will occur. Now it won't be flashing like that. I've still got to set up the code properly to get the guns to do what I want them to do. But if I sort of try to cover these, it'll literally just be out the ends of the barrels is what you'll see. Okay, so if we start with the deck, and what's happening up here is you can see that basically I've got the fiber optics. They feed into a bit of styrene tube that I use to sort of gather them all together, because there's like 8 sort of fiber optics that go into each light. And then they, just using UV resin, I've used that to glue it to the LED strip. So that makes it, you know, the great thing about the clear UV resin is it works like a light pipe, so you can actually get the light to sort of feed through properly. So that's what I've done for the top bit. I've got sort of a couple of connectors here. They're just header connectors so that I can sort of, you know, keep the pieces all separate. Now this one, I should say that the deck lights were actually pretty straightforward. You know, they kind of worked pretty well. This one, however, took a bit of finagling, and you can see it's musical chairs in there. It's a bit of a mess. You know, stuff sort of going everywhere, but essentially it was feed the fiber optics through, and of course these are 0.5mm diameter fiber optics. Feed them through and then try and sort of hold them in place and get some UV resin on them and quickly sort of set it. So it looks really messy, it looks untidy, but it is actually quite functional. And again, I've got sort of connectors, because these LED strips work in a chain. They all need to be connected together. These of course will be shortened once I've got once I've got everything together, but it's just really for testing purposes. So the other thing that I'm yet to do is I need to program it. So even though you can see this is, for example, a strip of 10 LEDs, and you might be thinking, oh, why'd you waste so many? You know, why didn't you have them all go to sort of one strip? And the reason was that these fiber optics aren't really that flexible. So it was easier to sort of have a full strip here that I could send the fiber optics to whichever LED was closest. And it turned out it happened to be 6. So there's sort of four in this chain, and there's 2 in this chain that won't be used, and that's fine. I can just program them so they don't turn on. That's a great thing about addressable LEDs, so I can have only the ones that are attached to the fiber optics actually light up. The other thing I need to do is quite a bit of light blocking, so for that I'm just going to use some black tulip fabric paint, and I'll be able to sort of light block all of that. because I'm not sure, there's going to be maybe some gaps in here. I really don't want any light leaking out through those gaps. So that's it for basically the guns on the top part. I've still got some more lighting work to do, but I feel as though I'm making some progress now. This build is taking quite some time, and a lot of it is purely because of the lighting. But I feel like I'm making some progress now. I apologise for this build series going on so long, but I know, some of you might be interested in the actual detail and see how it's sort of all done. Alright, I'm going to leave the video there. I think this one's gone on long enough. So the next video will be continuing on with more electronics, more modifications to the kit. But until then, I'll catch you later.
Thank you.